Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to come join us and mastermind with us. Um, my name is Angela Newman. I'm with eXp Realty and a master trainer for RAMS agents at eXp Realty. And a little bit about myself. I have been in real estate for 21 years. Um, Probably I would have to say that 96% of my business has been past clients, repeats, referrals, people I know, my sphere of influence. That's what our RAMS group is focused on, helping agents with that part of their business. And so now I am happy to be partnered with Mike Cerrone. I've known Mike. Uh, I had to look it up, and since 2013, we worked together on putting together a training presentation. And Mike, he's been in the business for 30 years in real estate. He's worn many different hats. So I'll just share a little bit about his kind of his bio, give you a little information about him. He's been a solo agent, a team leader, manager, independent broker owner. Believe he also owned a mortgage company. In Mike's best year in production, he listed 21 homes in 30 days. He had 9 closings in one day. He sold 113 homes in 1 year. And he was ranked in the top 300 salespeople in the nation by NAR magazine. And for the last decade, Mike's been running Mastermind Agent, helping tens of thousands of agents grow their production by sharing best practices of the top agents through daily emails, podcasts, interviews, summits, training courses. And that's how I met Mike. So thank you, Mike, for presenting to us today. And I'm excited.
Awesome. Hey, Angela, thanks for the introduction. That was a lot of fun. I get to go down memory lane a little bit there. Yeah, we've known each other for a while now, with about 11 years. That's incredible. It's amazing how time flies. And yeah, so been in real estate for 30, and I hope to share some of that information with you all today. Again, my name is Mike Cerrone, RAMS agents over at eXp Realty. But today we're going to focus on the NAR settlement proposal, what they put out there. You know, they kind of dropped a bomb on us on March 15th, which is funny because that's the Ides of March. Anybody, any history buffs know that's when Julius Caesar was assassinated. So anyway, maybe they picked that date on purpose. But anyway, the NAR settlement proposal came out. And what I want you to know about that, first of all, is it hasn't been resolved yet. Right? It hasn't been completed. The judge still has to approve it, the DOJ, and who knows who else. But expectations are that it will be approved and in place around mid-July, so around July 15th. And I think the best way to think about this moving forward is continue to do whatever you've been doing up through that July 15th. And you're going to be hearing information, and it's most likely going to occur, though. And if it occurs, then you need to be prepared. And I'm going to show you kind of an opportunity that I think I'm going to actually show you 2 opportunities in this call. And then I'll share something that we're kind of putting together as well. But I'm going to focus today on what to do as a buyer's agent and what to do as a seller's agent. Just a quick idea to try to help you get back on track and stay focused. Let me just also point out one thing. I think that when you're going through this process, if you get frustrated with NAR and the settlement and the lawsuits and why it's happening and everything, just remember the number 4 million. Just remember the number 4 million. You have 4 million reasons to stay optimistic, because every year in the United States, there are 4 million transactions in the residential real estate world as a minimum, right? That's when the market is really tight and there's not a lot of transactions. Can actually go up to 5, 6, and even 7 million in our past, in our last 20 years. But think about the 4 million. There's 4 million closings that have to happen. Each of those have 2 sides, right? A buyer and a seller. So there's 8 million sides that need to be handled. These people need help. They're not going to be able to do it on their own. There's no AI or technology that's going to come in and figure it out. They need our help and our assistance. This is too complicated of a transaction to be handled by some tech something. I remember when I got into business early on in the 90s, and Bill Gates was huge with Microsoft, and he looked at real estate and said, I'm going to go in there and take over. And after a while, he said, no way, there's just too many intricacies. It just goes too many directions. Anyway, so stay positive, but I do want to share some information with you with what they've said, what I think are the most important items, and what I think that you should be focusing on and looking at. So let's go ahead and jump into the presentation now that we got that out there. And I'm going to share a screen here. And there we go. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. Angela, if you can't see my screen, say no, because I can't see it, just say no. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rolling. All right, good. All right, so I'm going to open this up. I'm going to close this so we get a good recording for everybody. Look, we're going to try to do a replay of this. And got to hide there. All right, cool. And one final thing, boom, should be full screen. All right, so let's walk through this. Again, I have two quick presentations for you. And this first one is on the buyer agent fee side. And so let's rock through this. And really quick, I'm going to do a disclosure, let you know I'm not an attorney, not giving you any legal advice, right? So this presentation is only for educational purposes. It's not legal advice. This is just a thought exercise to stimulate some potential solutions for what we're all dealing with. Commission rates used are for concept clarity only. Rates are, of course, negotiable per broker and per agent per transaction. So seek advice from your broker and attorney before attempting any of these ideas. And again, these are just my opinions, not legal advice, just some thoughts. All right, now that we got that out of the way, here's the problem. NAR brought out this settlement and they put together a fact sheet. And in fact, this is where you could pick up a fact sheet. Let's see, I can't copy it. Let me do this real fast. I'll put this link into the chat box. And let's do that real fast. Meeting chat. I don't know if I can do that. I was going to try to do that, but oh, there it goes. Whew, it just kind of looked different than I've seen before. Hopefully you just got that link in your chat box if you want to go check this out. All right, so this fact sheet that NAR put together kind of gives you the rundown. It's a 4-page document. And in there, I went ahead and looked at it, and I just pulled out the two most important items I think you should be focused on. Number one, and this is just the text right out of it, says NAR has agreed, National Association of Realtors, has agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting, so limiting, not allowing, offers of compensation on the MLS. The change will go into effect mid-July of 2024. Okay, so you can no longer, as a listing agent, after mid-July, you can no longer put into the MLS the fact that you want to offer a co-op commission to a buyer's agent for bringing a buyer. You can do it apparently outside of the MLS, which is going to be very awkward, but you can't do it on the MLS. So let's just state that and keep moving. The next part that they write in is that the settlement, the NAR settlement, the agreement between the parties, provides that the MLS participants working with buyers must enter into written representation agreements with those buyers before touring a home, before going in the first home. And the change again is going to go into effect mid-July of 2024. Note again, it's a proposed settlement. Terms may change, hasn't been finalized yet, but I don't think they would have sent it out to us if it wasn't pretty far along. Have not heard anybody say they think it's going to be different other than just speculation. So it's probably what we're going to be dealing with. Number one is the one that changes everything. The fact that the MLSs around the country are going to remove the section where you would write a co-op compensation, and they're going to prohibit you writing it in anywhere else in the MLS. So you can't put it in the private notes. You know, people have tried to come up with ideas. There's nowhere else you can put it in there without doing a violation of their rules. And then you risk the possibility of getting kicked out of the MLS, which would be a problem, of course. So that's what's going on there. That's going to change our business and our business model, the way we've been doing it. Personally, I think it's going to make us less efficient. We'll have a less efficient market, which will hurt both sellers and buyers. They just don't realize it yet. And that's unfortunate. but there's nothing we can do about it. We're just players in the game. Someone else is moving the board or the rules of the board around. And so we just have to adjust and adapt and make the best of it. All right. But that is going to affect things, as you can imagine. If you have, I'm sure you've already heard about this, but let's keep going. Here's what I see popping out: some results, complications, and fee sources. So after the change, I believe that most listing agents will no longer negotiate a buyer agent fee into the listing agreement. So think about that. Some people think they'll continue to do it. I don't think they will. And the reason is because a listing agent is in competition often with other listing agents. And when that happens, they want to offer the best services and fee that they can. And if they could reduce the amount that they're showing, if one agent is showing 1 million and the other agent's showing 500,000, then the seller's going to say, I'd rather pay 500,000 than 1 million. Yeah, I'm just making some numbers up to get the idea across, right? So the listing agent's only going to negotiate their side of the fee structure moving forward. And that's something to know. Buyer agents are going to now have to get their fee from where? Well, they can get it from the buyer. That's always been an option. They can be paid either at the closing or outside the closing. They can go ahead and get it from the listing broker, but remember, it's not in the MLS, which means there's no longer an agreement, a universal agreement going out, unilateral universal agreement. And so if you go to the listing broker, you're going to have to get any kind of agreement in writing, because it's not in writing anywhere else. And you could get to the closing and not get paid if it's not in writing. So make sure if you go to the listing broker, you put it together in a separate agreement off the MLS. You can also get your fee from, as the buyer's agent or the buyer's representative, from the seller. Okay, you can ask the seller, and that could be negotiated at the time of offer as a term of the sale. Now, any of these solutions, again, are going to require a written agreement. So you're going to have to create a new piece of paper, a new document that's going to have to be signed by everybody. And it should be prepared by either your attorney, for instance, if you're the broker, and or provided to you by your broker. And I'll give you some more information on that, but just make sure it's in writing. So here's the solution that my mind immediately went to try to solve this for the buyer side and try to create a solution that works in all situations, okay? Because there's a lot of solutions floating out there. I believe the buyer agent commission is going to become part of the contract negotiation between the buyer and the seller. It's just going to be another term that they're going to negotiate. They negotiate price, they negotiate the closing date, they negotiate what is included and excluded, they negotiate if there's going to be any seller concessions towards financing typically. And they're going to negotiate those items. They're also now going to negotiate the buyer agent's compensation, which is kind of unfair, right? We're not negotiating listing agent's compensation, but it's going to be negotiating the buyer agent's compensation in this contract to buy and sell. You're going to have to get your mind around that. That's going to be the solution. So here's how it's going to work in the contract. The buyer is going to instruct the seller to pay the buyer's agent a sales commission of X at closing. Okay, so again, conceptually focus on that. The buyer is going to instruct the seller through the contract to pay from the seller's proceeds the buyer's agent, and they're going to pay him a sales commission, which is an important term, of X amount at the closing. Okay. Now, this language I just gave you is not going to be the language you actually use. You're going to need to get an attorney to help you, right? Because this text I give you is just the idea. You need to get text that actually matches your state laws and rules, and also it may be local laws and rules, regional, and of course, federal. And that's why you're going to need to get an attorney or your broker involved in this. But I want you to understand conceptually, this is what it's going to come down. I also believe that it's very important to use that word sales commission, because some solutions have said, well, just use a seller concession, Well, that's actually a term that goes with financing. And that's something that lenders like to use and came up with when they didn't like putting together escrows in the old days. If you're old enough, when they were putting together carpet allowances and painting allowances and so forth, they just kind of threw it all into one category and called it a seller concession to a buyer, and it becomes part of the financing. And so You don't want to use that though, because with your first time home buyers, if you were to do a seller concession, that eliminates and gets rid of their ability to get into a home with low cash. So I think it's very critical to use the word sales commission as you're moving forward, because that's something lenders understand. And that's already been moving through from a seller to a buyer's agent, right? It goes from the seller, the old, I'll show you in a minute, goes from the seller, the listing broker, to the buyer's broker. All right, by labeling the sales commission, here we go. This may solve the problem of using the buyer's potential seller concession to pay the broker or leave those funds for financial assistance. So we just chatted about that. I think that, by the way, this agreement, it's going to be inside the purchase contract initially. It depends on how fast people move to create a solution. I think that initially it'll be in what we call additional provisions. Every state has different contracts. In fact, some regions have different contracts. You may have another name for the section, but that's where the buyer and seller can kind of add something unique to their transaction and actually write it out so the parties can write things in there. I think that's where we're going to see it initially. And then I think it's going to move towards a contract addendum, especially the big brokers. They'll put that together first with their attorneys, and they'll have just an addendum that gets attached to the contract. And then eventually I think it's going to become part of the contract itself. And it's funny because Angela and I were talking a few days back, and we were remembering, we've been around so long, it used to actually be in the contract, or at least in the form of the contract, where it used to state what the commission was and how it was going to be broken out. Again, depends on what state you were in, but I'm in Colorado, and in Colorado it did that, but they don't do that anymore. And so I think they're going to kind of go back to that, but that's going to take time. So that's why I say initially, I think you're going to see an additional provisions, then it'll move to an addendum, and then it'll move into being part of the contract. And that's this last statement. It's eventually going to be formalized into a standard contract, whether you do that by, say, a real estate commission like we have in my state, where they're all standardized for the state, or maybe your MLS is doing it in your area, or your realtor association, or maybe even a large brokerage. Depends on what your local custom is, but I think that's how it's going to come down. All right, so I just want to share this with you because I'm visual and I like to look at this kind of thing. This is the way it has been done and is currently being done. That is, we got these 4 players: a seller, seller's broker, a buyer's broker, and a buyer going towards the closing. And at the closing, the seller is going to pay their broker, the seller's broker, the commission. And then the seller's broker has offered out to share their compensation on the MLS. And so they're going to go ahead and pay the buyer's broker some portion of whatever they promised there at the closing, and everybody's happy. I think in the new way, if you want to visualize it, it's going to happen just a little bit differently. And that's, we still have the same 4 players. At the closing, the seller will still pay their broker, the seller's broker. Where it's going to be different is here. The buyer's broker is going to say, wow, that was nice, I would like to get paid. And they're going to turn to their client, the buyer, and say, hey, could you please pay me? And the buyer's going to say, yeah, just hold on a minute. I need to make an instruction. It's already in the contract. Here's the instruction. Hey, seller, pay my buyer broker. All right, so that's already been negotiated in to the purchase contract, but that's effectively what will happen. And then the seller is going to cut a check at the closing with the closing entity and make sure that that buyer's broker gets paid because they were instructed to do so by the buyer. All right, so that's how I see that all kind of playing out on the buy side and some of the potential of what I think should happen. With that said, I'm now going to flip gears and I'm going to show you what I think is going to happen on the sell side. By the way, then I'm going to open up for Q&A. So if you got questions, make sure you're writing them down and we'll get right to them. I just want to make sure you have all the information first. So I went ahead and prepared 2 little parts to this. And this is now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about how I think you have an opportunity on the seller agent side. And the opportunity is actually pretty good. I think you're going to be able, as a listing agent, you're going to be able to double your fee more often than you've been doing it in the past. That's, I think, an opportunity that pops up. We got the same disclosures we did before. Again, remember, it's all educational purposes. Talk to your lawyer, and we're not making any guarantees on commissions. Those are all negotiable. Here is the problem, again, stated out. It's the exact same problem, right? NAR came in, their fact sheet, they got the 2 changes. 1, you can't put the co-op fee in the MLS anymore. And two, you're going to have to get something signed with your buyer and represent them before you see the very first home. By the way, I've been doing that for the last 30 years because in 1993, when I got into the business, almost 31 years now, Colorado had just changed its law and added buyer agency. We went and moved away from that old thing called seller sub-agency. So I've been dealing with buyer agency my whole career. And from the very beginning, I thought, this is great. I can commit a buyer to me and I'm committing to them. Let's go ahead and put it in writing and everything's going to be swimming. So I've never done anything other than signing a buyer agency with a buyer at the very beginning before I ever show them any homes. So to me, this doesn't seem foreign at all. I just want you to know it's out there. It's very easy to do. And it's not going to be difficult if you haven't been doing it. It's just a mind switch, just a reorientation. The beauty for everybody listening is that all agents are going to have to do this now. Okay. So in the old days, I was doing it, not everybody else was doing it. So it was a little awkward when a buyer would say, well, I didn't have to do that with Joe or Sally. They didn't make me, go meet them and have a presentation and sign something before they'd show me a home. I'd say, yeah, but I'm a lot better than Joe and Sally. Let's talk. I'll show you why. And then I would walk them through the benefits of working with me and ask them to sign at the time. And the majority of them did. All right. So that's what you're going to do. And the beauty is now everyone's going to have to do that. All other agents are going to have to do that. So I think it's going to actually be easier on you. Here's what I see now coming out on the seller side, the seller agent side. So after the change, again, most listing agents will not negotiate the buyer agent fee into the listing agreement because it makes them more competitive. They'll get that their competitive edge for maybe a month or two or three, but then I think all agents are going to start doing it, and the competitive advantage, eliminated itself because everybody's now only negotiating the listing agent side. However, that's what you're probably, and it's why you're going to see it and how fast it's probably going to happen. So therefore, most listing agents, by the way, again, are going to reduce the listing commission to just the listing agent side. That's part one. The result of that is after the change, buyer agents are going to have to get that buyer to sign the buyer agency agreement before they can show any homes. And many buyers are not going to want to sign. Okay, they're going to get, they're not going to be presented to properly. They're going to be confused. They're wondering why this is different than it's been in the old days. And so they just won't sign, and they're not going to, they don't want to be obligated to pay a buyer's agent. And so they're just not going to move forward. Those buyers are going to do what I believe is number three, which is instead of signing a buyer agent, a lot of those buyers are going to go direct to the listing agent. By the way, you can think that's a bad idea. You don't like it. You're frustrated with it. I completely understand. I'm just telling you what I foresee happening when I look in my crystal ball. And we have to, as agents, we have to adjust in the market and prepare ourselves to move forward in this new reality. So I just see that a lot of buyers won't sign the buyer agency, and they're going to go direct to the listing agent. And the listing agent then is going to treat that person as a customer in my market. That means there's no agency relationship, or they may practice dual agency if that's their policy, or a thing called transaction broker. I'm not sure if everybody calls that same term nationally, but that's when you're acting neutrally. Again, if you have any questions on all these terms, I'm not giving legal advice, so talk to your broker, but I just want you to get the idea. So I think that most listing brokers will treat them as customers, the buyer, and have them sign a disclosure. And now the big risk here is for the listing agent. The listing agent risks, boy, I'm working with the seller. Now I'm going to be expected to work with the buyer. I'm working both sides. I'm doing double work, but I'm only getting paid one side because I only negotiated half of what I typically, whatever their percentage is, or a part of what I would have done in the past. So I'm earning half the commission, but I'm doing twice the work. This doesn't sound fair to me, right? And I agree with you. It's not fair if that's the way you set it up. It was a mistake. So here's why I think the solution is for the seller's agent. For the seller's agent, I think you should create a variable commission structure in which in the listing agreement, you're going to set up a couple different options of how you're going to get compensated. And you're going to list them out. And it's going to look something like this. Again, I'm not giving you the language, only the concept. Here's the idea. We're going to go all the way back to an old term called procuring cause. And if you recall, procuring cause means the reason that a buyer buys. It's the reason that the reason that the buyer decided to make a purchase. It's kind of nebulous like that. but in essence, what it means is who is working with the buyer to help them buy when they actually bought. So if the seller is the procuring cause, in other words, if the seller finds the buyer who closes, then the commission will be X. Okay, this is just the way it's going to be in your agreement. You're going to list this out maybe in your listing agreements, additional provisions, whatever you call that in your state. Next, so this is option number 2 in our variable rates. If the listing agent is the procuring cause, if the listing agent actually is the reason that the buyer buys, they find and bring the buyer to closing, then the commission is something more. We'll say 2x, but it could have been 3x, or it could have been 1.5x. I've done this one other time, and somebody was saying, well, what if I wanted to do 1.75? I'm like, you do whatever you want. Commissions are yours. You negotiate. I'm just trying to get you the idea that if you do both sides, you have got to ask for more in your total commission, right? So you're doing both the listing side and the buying side. And the way I've got it written up, that doubles the listing agent's compensation. So this is actually a pretty cool opportunity. And then you have a third option, which is if a buyer agent, an agent representing a buyer, is the reason that this buyer comes in and is the procuring cause, someone other than the listing agent, then the commission is X, that's the listing side, and or plus the buyer agent's commission, which is going to be negotiated and paid by either buyer, seller, or some combination, because it's going to be negotiated into the deal. So this might reduce the seller's overall cost versus what it would have been before. It might be exactly the same. It might be more. We don't even know until all these things happen. And it's not going to be like one, just like it is today. I mean, do you actually know what other agents are charging? I can tell you it's different than what you think, because I probably charge a lot different than you. All right. So you got to just say that, hey, the seller might be better off. Maybe not. My point is this: you're going to have 3 variables on how that buyer shows up to the deal, and the compensation will be changed or adjusted per that answer. All right, here's an example to try to help clarify if I'm speaking in tongues. If the seller is the procuring cause, then the commission is, say, 10%, just making numbers up. If the listing agent is the procuring cause, then the commission is 20%. If another agent is the procuring cause, the listing agent receives 10% commission, and the buyer agent commission may be paid by the seller or the buyer, or both, through negotiations. So we don't know the amount or who's going to pay it until it gets negotiated. This, by the way, gives everyone an incentive to find a buyer. Okay, so I think that this is going to be what you're going to see out there in the world as the listing side, the listing agents. And the cool part is that number 2, you're going to end up seeing more often where the listing agent is bringing in the buyer, because we already talked about why. I just want to point one other thing out. I had some pretty good years, and when I hit my peak year of 113 units, I brought in I double-ended 25% of my own listings. I was heavy listings. I had more listings than buyers. At the time, I double-ended about 25%, or 1 in 4. I just want you to know that's possible. It's happened. It happens all the time. And if you go way back in time, like in the 50s and the 40s and everything, they double-ended everything. They didn't do any co-oping, right? So it is possible to do this. Again, you just got to kind of adjust your mindset around what's going on. I want to give you one more piece that might help, and that is for this double listing agent payday is what I called it. And that's basically just this idea of how do you set this up to happen before the situation. If you wait till the situation is happening, it's too late. You need to set it up early. So again, the listing agent's going to have an incentive to find and work with the buyer, because they're going to earn a double commission, or more than what they would have on just the listing side. Here's how you set it up. Number 1, you're going to predetermine the double-end transaction working relationship. So we're talking about agency here, or non-agency, but the working relationship. What are you going to do with both parties? How are you going to be working with that seller? How are you going to be working with that buyer as far as your agency or non-agency agreement? Again, I say that because there's a lot of different variables and options, but you need to know what they are. You need to know what you offer, you and your broker. You have to, number 1, get that figured out, because you're going to have to make a lot of disclosures. 2, you got to have a listing presentation that, in my opinion, has a variable commission option listed and explained, right? You've got to be able to show your seller what is going to happen. By the way, in that conversation with the seller, it's going to take a little longer because now you're going to have to say, these are the options and how it could go down, right? You could find the buyer, I could find the buyer, another agent could show up with the buyer. Your costs are going to adjust based on what happens. It's not going to be as simple as the old days where we just said, hey, it's going to be X no matter who finds the buyer. Now we've got all these crazy adjustments, but I think it has to happen that way just because of the way it's playing out. Anyway, you got to have that in your listing presentation. Next, you got to have a listing agreement. This is the listing agreement between an agent and a seller, and it's going to show those variable commission options pre-filled in before you meet. So you're going to have all your language figured out. You just can't write this out on the fly. I mean, maybe you could, maybe you're that good, but most of us can't. You're going to have to pre-think about this, and you're going to have to get your broker involved and your attorney, their attorney, your attorney, somebody who's going to have to look at this language and make sure it's correct, right? Okay, so next, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to market this home now with an eye towards buyer lead generation, i.e. like doing mega open houses or putting it out somewhere on Zillow or I don't know, wherever you think you're going to find a buyer. You're going to have a really awesome, amazing yard sign because now you want sign calls to come back in just like the old days. I say that because when you become a really heavy listing agent, you don't want to talk to buyers anymore because they take a lot of time. Well, now you may want to turn that around because they become another income source. If you're able to figure this out, nobody else is, or they're having a hard time or struggle. So you're going to want to open that up and make sure your number and phone number is really easy to reach out to in your marketing efforts for buyers, for the public to come in. I know that sounds weird, but I'm just telling you, in my experience, I would reduce that because I didn't want the buyer calls as much. So, all right, next. In property in the marketing of the property, again, this is what I was just saying, you want to make sure the buyers can contact you. So make sure your number is really big, make sure you put a lot of ways to contact, so email addresses, text message, IM, see me on Instagram, whatever. You're going to really open that up for the buyer to get in touch with you because now you got the opportunity to do more double ends. Next, you're going to want to be ready to show your listing. Okay, when that buyer comes in, you need to have a process in place to show your listing, to make your disclosure before you walk them in that house, to walk through what the relationship is. And either you're going to do the showing or you're going to have somebody else do it. Like you may be referring this out to another agent. You might be asking for a referral fee for that, which wouldn't be a bad idea. That is something that I did this once before. People really like this page. So that's something you might want to take a screenshot of. I'll give you maybe 30 seconds real quick while I get a drink of water. If you want to go ahead and do a quick screenshot of this. We're almost done, by the way. All right, let's do this. Let me just show it visually to you. Sometimes it helps. I'm visual, as I said, I like it. So in the old way, here's what we saw. We had a seller side commission, we had a buyer side commission, and we had a seller's agent and a buyer's agent. And we get to the closing and the seller side commission goes to the seller's agent and the buyer side commission goes to the buyer's agent. Very clean cut. Everybody understood what was going on. In the new way, I think this is what we're going to actually see. This is where the listing agent procures the buyer. We're still going to have a seller side commission. We're going to still have a buyer side commission for doing that work. The difference, I think, is we only have one party now, the listing agent or the seller's agent, and they're going to get both commissions, okay, both sides of the commission for doing both parts of the work, the sell side and the buy side. So hopefully that was helpful. And what we're going to do now is we're going to open up for some Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down so I can see everybody and ask if anybody has any questions. And if you do, go ahead and just unmute yourself and fire away. So we want a kind of an open forum here. Go ahead.
Mike, I have a question. So just today I had an agent that's in another state who was referring me to their grandparents here in Texas. And they had contacted me last week and asked if I would be able to help them. And I said, oh yes, definitely. And he said he was going to talk to his grandparents about it. I followed up today and he said that they want to wait until August to list, and because of the NAR settlement, and they want to see what's going to happen. Do you have a recommendation for verbiage? Because I feel like we're getting that. I've talked to other real estate agents, they're on listing appointments or talking to people that were going to be ready to list at this time, and now they're wanting to put it on hold.
Sure. That's a great one, right? It's a challenge. And I'm sure we have enough people in here that they've got their opinions and they could throw in. So again, I'm very open forum. If you have any answers to these questions and thoughts, please unmute yourself and let us know. I'll go ahead and throw out my initial reaction to this. Is number one, I'd want to communicate a lot with the, hey, Patty, did you have a comment on it?
I always have a comment, I think.
Go for it.
Well, I'm always, as I've been sitting here listening to this, and I have, I'm like you, I feel like I started back in 93 and we were doing that. And then now, and now we're back. But I am always just such a big fan of hitting everything head on ahead of time. And listening to this, I'm already in my brain thinking, man, you put together in writing a bullet point thing about the NAR settlement, and, you give it to people when you're initially talking to them. Here's what all this kind of came down to, and give them a summary, and put their fear or their anxiety or their questions as much as you can to rest right from the get-go. And they might just not wait. They might just move forward. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I'm just in my head thinking, hit it at the beginning head on and give them something to look at, kind of like your little diagrams here, or, I mean, it just seems like something like that could get put together and reviewed and all those things. And we could just, like I said, just hit it from the get-go.
Patty, I love that. I love how you're going to go directly at it. I think that's absolutely the right answer here. That's where I was going to go with it. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. I see that Andrea Grimm has her hand up. I don't know if you pronounce it Andrea. That's my sister's name as well. She says Andrea or Andrea. But go ahead and let us know if you can unmute yourself and let us know your thoughts. I'd love to get a mastermind going here. This is awesome. Thank you,
Hey,
Patty.
Mike. It's Andrea, but I answer to anything close.
Got it.
I'm not one of those that's real particular. But yeah, I love what Patty said. I've known Patty and Angela for a very long time. I appreciate them both. I appreciate Angela inviting me today. This has been the best. I've hopped on everything that I could get my hands on, and this has definitely been makes the most sense and been the most informative. But what I was going to say is I'm kind of like Patty, I like to hit everything head on. But my first question to somebody would be, what is your reason for wanting to wait? Why do you want to wait? Why do you think that's going to make a difference? And if you watch the media, I have a feeling the answer is probably going to be to save on commissions. And so I think that's probably where the conversations should go and be addressed, because once they realize it's not going to make a significant difference like they think it is because the media's told them this, then they might be more inclined to just say, oh, okay, well, I guess it's not what we thought, and we're not doing ourselves any favors by waiting. But that's my 2 cents on it.
I think you nailed it again. Our industry is so smart, especially if you've been in it at any length of time. You've been in the trenches, you know how these things work. I love it. Thank you, Andrea. That was an excellent addition. And I'm just going to play off of what you've said so far. And again, if anybody else has another comment, just unmute yourself and jump in. So a couple quick ideas. Number one, and you guys already nailed this, but open up the lines of communication and start talking, right? Find out what their goals and objectives are. Because if for some reason they got to move in the next 60 days, they can't wait for this thing to be figured out. They got to move now. right? That would be one thing. If they have a lot of time, great. The other thing is, I recommend that you outline this whole thing for them. Let me go back. So I've listed a lot of properties in my career. I've been very fortunate there. What I learned is that I control the process, but my client, in this case, the seller, controls the decisions. Okay. And I think if you follow that, you're going to be in great shape. So I will guide them. I will make sure everything happens the way they want it. I'm going to guide that process, but they're going to make the decisions. So I would say, hey, let's talk about what you're trying to do, find out what they're doing. And then, as you mentioned, I think it was Andrea mentioned, hey, why do you think you want to wait? Open that up and just listen and take a lot of notes. By the way, always ask more questions than you make statements, right? My grandfather used to say, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in proportion. So if you ask a lot of questions, you're going to hear a lot of information. So find out why they want to wait and see if it makes sense. And if it does, that's great. The one thing I recommend you don't do is argue with them, right? Because you may win the battle, but you'll lose the war because they want to be right. They don't want to be wrong. And so I would open it up and give them what the options are. That's another one, is you give them, hey, here's the way I see it falling out. Here are the options that could occur. And based on this, I think this option has 10% chance, this one 20, this one has a 70% chance of happening. But ultimately, you have to decide, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what would you like to do? Okay, so those are kind of all the ways I would play it out. The fact is this, we don't know what's going to actually happen. We don't know how it's going to play out. It's an unknown. And that's what you have to tell them. You have to say, I don't know what it's going to look like after July 15th. It may be, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that you could save money. It may be that you paid exactly the same amount of money. It could even be that a great buyer agent comes in and negotiates more money for their pay, and you would have to pay them more. See, NAR, I think it was NAR. I know most local associations came down long ago and said, hey, buyer agents, you can no longer negotiate a different commission in the contract than was stated on the MLS, right? A lot of markets have said that, and I've heard that feedback. Remember, that's a rule and not a law, by the way, a rule, not a law. So a rule could be easily changed and adjusted. So I anticipate NAR is going to adjust that and remove it. But that used to be a problem. And the reason it used to be a problem, I'm going back in history for a minute. I used to work with a really sharp, I had a friend who was a really sharp buyer's agent, and in particular, a buyer's agent. And she would sign a buyer agency agreement, and she would ask for a lot, way more than everybody else. And she would go into the contract, and in the negotiation of the contract, the listing agent would be offering this much, and she wanted this much. And so she would say, yeah, in the contract between the buyer and the seller, she'd say, yeah, buyer accepts your offer of compensation of this. The buyer now demands that you pay this much to their agent. You're like, in a fast market, you can't do that. True, but in a slow market or even a normal market, the buyers have a lot more power. And so, if a seller's been sitting there for 3, 4, 5, 6 months with no offers, they're going to talk. And so she was able to negotiate her commission way higher as a buyer's agent than what you would think would be typical. And I think NAR saw that and they put that rule in place. Well, I think that rule is going to disappear. And so that's why I'm saying it's possible that the seller actually ends up in a worse position than if they had just gone and done the normal thing today. We don't know how it's all going to play out. Does any of that make sense? What do y'all think of that?
Yes, I think that's exactly it, is we just don't know what is going to happen. And I had a couple of thoughts when that agent told me, I don't have direct communication with the client yet, so I'm relying on him kind of passing information. But this is a great time of year to list. Inventory is low. There's still tons of buyers out there that are trying to find properties. And then we have an election year coming up. which that always tends to throw things out of whack as well. And that's going to be probably around that August time, start feeling some of that concern. People kind of hold their breath during that period. So
this is all true, all things you should bring up and all things you should present to the client, in this case, a potential client, ask them what they think. I'll throw out one other quick point, and that is, you got to find out, again, you got to ask a lot of questions on the situation. Oh, so let me just say this, Angela. I would say to your friend, hey, can I just speak to your grandparents and walk through what the options are? I'm not going to try to force them into anything. I just want to see what their situation is and kind of get a dialogue going and see how I can best serve them, how I can best help them. Because you got to talk to these people and find out what they're doing. For instance, are they selling and buying? Or are they just selling and cashing out and moving to a property they already own? Those are two different answers of what you're going to advise them. Because if they're selling and buying, whichever market they're in, the post or the pre or the post NAR, they're going to have the same environment that they're going to have to deal with. Because if they do it pre, then yeah, they're going to pay a little bit more when they sell, but it's already going to be baked in when they buy, right? That's kind of been the beauty of it before. Whereas if they wait till the post, if they're doing a sell and a buy, yeah, they may pay less when they sell, but they may have to pay more when they buy, right? These things could wash out if they're just moving from one property to another. If they're completely selling and just cashing out and they're taking their money to go to the Caribbean and I don't know, they already own a place on an island, well, then maybe that would be a good idea to wait and try to put more cash in your pocket. It's the other thing I want to advise you to do is when you do this properly, you've got to remove yourself from the outcome, because if you don't, it's going to come across unnatural and it's not going to work, because you're going to be biased and it's going to come through in your conversation. And the best way to get over that is to tell them something that works against your interests. So maybe you should just take this money and sell, and you should wait and sell and get the most money you can, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, and go to the island. Maybe you should do that. Or maybe you shouldn't do anything and wait till next year. Do you really need the money now? Maybe you should rent it out and keep it. The market's been going up. Have you thought about just keeping the property and not selling at all? First of all, these are all great options for them. Second, when you bring up those options, all of a sudden they go, oh, wait a minute, Angela's not just trying to get a commission from me today. She's trying to actually help me and see what my situation is. So that's why I say be open, ask a lot of questions, look at options and alternatives that that you may, a real estate agent who you think is a salesperson may not have offered. A great one is like the lease. Have you ever considered leasing the property? And then just be quiet. Because a lot of times they'll say something like, oh gosh, when we were younger, we leased the property out. And you remember that tenant that trashed the place out? I do not want to lease again. So you didn't have to make the argument for them. They'll make the argument for you. Or maybe they think it is a good idea. I don't know. You've got to let them come up with their own answers. So Andrea, I see you got your hand up. Unmute yourself. Let us know what you're thinking.
I raised my hand because I am very severely ADD and I will just jump in and like in the middle of everything. So I wait to get called on. So there was a couple of things that I wanted to throw out there. So I love everything that you're saying. I've always believed in educating the clients so that they can make the best decision for themselves. And like you said, we don't know what it is exactly going to look like, but as you've shown us today, and as we've all been kind of talking amongst each other about, we do know some things that are going, kind of vaguely what they're going to look like. But I think one thing too that people aren't realizing is there are going to be, at least in the lower end priced homes, I believe, like the first time home buyer range, I believe we're going to see some buyers fall out because like you said, they could go to the listing agent. Yes, maybe. My experience with first time buyers is they don't really know what to do or how to handle things. And if you mention, they have to pay a buyer's commission, that's going to be something that kind of scares them out of the market at some point. I've seen some of that already starting to happen. And the other thing I was going to bring up is that I like to, with my referral people, if, I understand, especially with family, some people are kind of hesitant, and I would never ever hesitate to refer Angela to anybody, but I can understand how somebody would be a little bit hesitant, and maybe just give them on a three-way call. That seems to always calm the waters with somebody. And, especially when you have an agent who refers you somebody that's either close to them, or if he hasn't worked with you before and doesn't have that full trust in what you're going to say and how you're going to advise. I think a three-way call is a way to put everybody's nerves at rest. And that's just kind of my practice of doing things. That's it.
Excellent, excellent. I love masterminds because that was excellent information and excellent advice. I love the three-way call idea. That's power. I'd write that down for sure, Angela. Get your referrer and the referee on the call with you. I think those are the right terms. But anyway, the parties on the call and have a little powwow. So there's a nice little introduction, because I think you said it was kind of happening across states. You could also do it if they're local, you could do it at a coffee shop or meet in person. What a great idea. I'm also going to throw out this. I recognize that not everybody has been doing a real true buyer agency presentation for a variety of reasons. Some people say because it was the speed of the market and you had to get to these leads really fast before someone else, especially if you were buying leads online and stuff. And I know, because I've interviewed over 200 of the top agents in the nation, that they have actually practiced that, where they would run out and show a property. The first one, they used to say the first one's free, and then they would try to do the buyer agency agreement later. Now you're going to have to all do that before. And so I've actually been putting together a brand new buyer agency presentation based on what I've done in the past, because I think that's going to be one of the keys. And you were talking about these first-time home buyers. I think for all buyers, but in particular first-time home buyers, you have to walk them through the process and educate them. And the best thing to do is to have that buyer consultation with them right at the beginning. And you tell them, I'm going to educate you on the process. I'm going to walk you through the steps. I want you to know everything there is to know. Bring all your questions. Some people will even bring a lender into that and have the lender involved. I'm so old, and 30 years ago, we were actually trained to do all the pre-qualification ourselves. Patty probably remembers this, right? We learned how to do all the ratios ourselves. So we would pre-qualify them in that first appointment. But in any event, if you walk them through and educate them and show them what's going on and show all your value, I know that's an overused statement, but you're showing how complicated this process is and how you know how to make sure all the things occur, and that you're going to get compensated for it, and that they're going to be responsible for your compensation. And you got to let that hang in there. I'm just talking about a buyer agency presentation now, where you got to let it hang in there that this buyer is going to have to pay you, and they're going to be nervous and shaking and whatever you're going to see, and that's okay, because they've got to understand what that means. And then you're going to give them a solution. Okay, so that was the problem, and then you got to give them the solution. And the solution is that you, as a great buyer's agent, are going to go get your compensation from somewhere else, right? The buyer is going to be responsible for your compensation because you're working for them. However, you're going to get your compensation from somewhere else. That's the way the laws are, well, at least in our state, has been for the last 30 years. It's just that it became practice to receive it through the MLS, and so it was very easy. And now we're just going to go back to where you're going to actually have to be the negotiator to go in as a buyer's agent and negotiate your compensation to be paid by the listing broker and or the seller rather than your buyer. And you could make, by the way, performance promises and guarantees to do risk reversals on those kind of things so that buyers feel more comfortable signing with you. That's something I want you to start thinking about. How can I make it comfortable for my buyer to accept? How can I take on some of the risk so the buyer doesn't have to, and they're more comfortable signing up with me rather than going directly to the listing broker? Because I think you're 100% correct there, Andrea, that these first-time buyers, they absolutely need us to walk them through the process. Even experienced people that bought 1, 2, 3 homes, they have not done hundreds and thousands of homes like we have, certainly as an industry and as a brokerage. And so we know a lot more than they do. They need our help and assistance to walk them through. as you know, if everything goes swimmingly during the transaction, it looks like they didn't need us. But you hit a hiccup. Can't tell you how many times I've been at a closing. It was supposed to take an hour, and I'm there 3 hours later trying to figure out a problem that popped up out of nowhere. Anybody done that? Yeah, those are stories you need to start sharing with your buyers and sellers of why you're there, right? And the more description you can give as to what happened, the more real it is for them. And the more they go, oh my gosh, this person has been there. They've been in the trenches. I need them, right? It's just like if you went in to have, I was going to say brain surgery, but that's pretty, just say foot surgery. And you talk about you're a foot surgeon and how somebody came in and they had a problem with their tendon. And if you hadn't fixed it, they would never be able to walk again. But you use the XYZ combo and boom, now they're walking great. Not only walking, they're running, right? So that's the kind of thing you got to use as the agent. You got to give experiences and stories. Who wants to throw in? What else we got? Yeah, okay, good. Anybody else have an issue or challenge or concern with this NAR settlement? Something you've run into, something you're worried about, something you're fearful, and you want the mastermind to kind of throw out an idea on how to solve it. Hey, we just hit the top of the hour. I was here a few minutes late. I'm going to hang in with you guys for a couple more minutes. I'll stay to answer your questions. Do you have any other questions or concerns that you bumped into that you would like us to all kind of mastermind and brainstorm on? If you do, unmute yourself and just let us know.
Okay, I'm not raising my hand this time. I'm just asking. You were talking about, and yes, you've been in it longer than I have, but you were talking about how you had a 25%, double-sided, transactions. I know that was then, this is now. It's a new way of thinking for a lot of newer agents that I try to work with. What do you recommend as far as, I guess my question is, listing agents have never, in the last several years, have never had to go out and try to get buyers. We're supposed to, but that's not usually what they do. So what would you recommend for these newer agents coming up that have never experienced that, how to go about that better?
Sure. You mean as far as being able to put together double-ended sides, double-ended transactions?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
not just depending on a buyer's agent to bring buyers to your listing and just sit back watching it happen.
Excuse me. Great question. Let me just start off this part of to answer that question with saying this. It's harder. It's harder. Again, I want to go back to the fact that we made such an efficient market as realtors and real estate agents. We made this MLS thing and we perfected this MLS thing, and you really see it in a hot market, but even in a slow market. I have an economic background. That's my undergraduate degree and really love it. And so I'm just telling you, we have a very efficient market. It just works well. By the way, these are the kind of conversations you might want to have with buyers and sellers, right? We have a very efficient market. It works extremely well. And that is why listing agents and buyer's agents, quite honestly, did not have to go find the other side of the transaction. The efficient system we created solved that problem for us. So because of that, you got to start thinking like an old timer. Go read some old, I'm not kidding, go read some old real estate books from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I can't remember if I said on this call, Angela, correct me. I know I recently told you, I looked back at my wife's father was a real estate agent in the 70s, and I looked at his business plan. And his business plan, when I read through it, basically said that he's going to be the listing agent and the buyer's agent on every transaction. Everything. There was no co-op theory. He was going to do all of it. He was going to bring buyers and sellers on every deal together. That's how he wrote his plan, where you don't see a plan written that way today, right? So just look at the numbers. All right, all that said, if I were going to go do it today, I would do what I did in the past, which is you need to start, if you're a heavy listing agent, you're going to start collecting all the buyer leads that come in, like the sign calls, Whenever you put marketing out, wherever you're putting it out, buyer leads are coming in. You're no longer going to discard those. You're going to collect them and become a collector of leads. And you're going to have a buyer pool and a seller pool. We're going to do that on both sides. You're going to become a true broker. Okay. You're going to be creating these databases of buyers and sellers and what their criterias are. And you're going to then once a month or so, you're going to go through there and try to make matches, right? You're going to be very descriptive in what the seller owns, even if they're just a lead, right? You're going to be very descriptive what that buyer wants. You're going to have to ask a lot of questions. You're going to have to create yourself some forms for the matching, how many bedrooms, how many baths, what kind of style, what location, what are these people looking for? What's the price range? And then you're going to start putting them together. If you want to visualize in the old days, do you ever play the card game where you're trying to match king and a king? I'm trying to remember what it was called. You put all the cards down on the floor. We did this as kids, and you'd flip them over, and you're trying to match a king and a king and a jack and a jack and a two and a two. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
That's memory game.
What was it called?
I think it was just memory game. They have little games like that nowadays. It's called memory. I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely was a memory game. We had a name for it. I don't know why I can't think of it, but that's exactly what it is. Because when you played that game, by the way, you flip the card, one card, and then you flip another card somewhere else, and you see the card, but then everybody's got to flip that card back down. And your memory has to remember where was the king or where was the queen, where was the jack, where were these cards, so that when your turn comes, you flip one and then you're trying to remember where the match was. All right. Same thing here. You're just going to be doing with buyers and sellers. You're going to be like, oh man, I had this buyer who wanted a property just like this. Who was that? And you're going to go in your database and try to, that's why you got to have a good database. You're going to try to sift and sort it down to the 3 it might be. And then you're going to give them a call. Okay. And say, hey, do I have a connection here? The other way you can do it, so that's number one. The other way you can do it is if you niche into a property type or an area, subdivision. If you're niched into some kind of geographic area or type of property, which is what I did, I was a geographic farmer, this double in thing becomes a lot easier because your database is just full of all the properties in the same area and all the buyers who want to live in that area. And now you're matching. Anybody hear of Alan Dom? Anybody know who Alan Dom is? Okay. Center City, Philadelphia. All he sold were high-rise condos in one building. That's how he got started. And by the time that I bumped into him and found out about him, I think he sold 600 homes in 1 year by himself. He had a couple of assistants to do the paperwork, but he also owned a title company and mortgage company. But all he did was he focused on one building in Center City, Philadelphia, high-rise condos. And he knew every single unit and all their floor plans and everything. And he created databases of buyers and sellers. And I don't remember specifically, but in my head, he was somewhere around 70, 80% double end, right? Because he was the market. He was a true market maker. If you know anything about the stock market, he was a market maker. He's bringing all the buyers and sellers together because he niched into this one type of property. Does that make sense or help?
Yes, absolutely. It does. It gives me a little bit of insight as far as how to lead newer agents that haven't experienced that kind of stuff before.
Cool. Yeah, it's a fun business, right? The simpler you can make it, the better. The more focus you can have, the better too. Good. So anything else that we have while we're all together that we'd like to brainstorm on or mastermind on before we break?
Hey, Mike, I wanted to chime in and kind of piggyback on what Angela's question was. So I have a client friend that wanted to also wait, until August, but then he contacted me yesterday and asked, hey, do you think we can list it and just put zero, like zero for the, buyer's compensation on MLS and on HAR. And I was just like, well, I guess, I think we can do that. How would you respond to a client that suggests that?
Hey, Lismel, thank you for bringing up. That's a great question. And thank you for bringing that. See, that's why I like these real world practical questions, right? Because we can now all think about it. We can all kind of brainstorm on it. And my first reaction is, my first reaction to him, I'm going to stall. Now, let me just tell you what I'm doing in my head and then what comes out of my mouth. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stall and let my mind kind of absorb it. And I'm probably going to ask some follow-up questions. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, I don't know if you said the name, but hey, Charlie, I'm just making up a name. Hey, Charlie, let's do that. You know, that may be possible. Why don't we sit down and talk about it so that we can go through the options? But that may be possible. And they're either going to say yes, and you go meet them, or they're going to say, well, what do you mean? Why do we have to talk? And you say, well, because it's a really strange world right now. And I think you and I need to sit down and kind of walk through the options and make sure that it makes sense to both of us. So that's my first answer to you. I want to give a bigger picture answer as well. We're in shaky ground. There's no solid ground here. It's all up in the air. And if you're someone who likes that, you like riding roller coasters and stuff, you're going to love this market. If you're someone who needs stable ground, this is going to be challenging. I need you to go to your fun kid side where you like going on roller coasters, because that's what it's going to be. My expectation is this. If this all goes through, July 15th, the change is going to happen. It ain't going to be resolved by July 16th. It's not going to take one day. It's going to take maybe a year or 2 or 3 years for this all to sort out. Here's what I mean. Everybody's going to go a different direction. Agents are going to try something different. Brokers are going to try something different. Sellers are going to try something unique. And buyers, tech companies are going to come in and try to do something different. All kinds of players are going to do stuff that's different, experimenting to figure out if they have the right answer and formula for this thing. Personally, as I keep talking about efficient markets, I think that people are going to be doing all these weird things, and it's not going to be efficient. Okay, it's not going to work like it used to, and people are going to get frustrated, but they have to go through it. Well, let me give you the best example. You're in a hot market right now. We used to have an old saying that the buyers got to crash before they can buy. Okay. What we meant by that is, because there have been hot markets in the past. And so in the super hot markets, when they get hot like that, unfortunately, the buyer won't listen to you. Okay. They do not believe that you have to offer more than the asking price or whatever, right? And so sometimes you got to let your buyer get into the negotiation and lose the deal out to the other 3 buyers before they realize how tough this market is. Would you agree? Anybody experience that? Yeah. And so that's what I think is going to happen, but just on a bigger scale now. All across America, these buyers and sellers are going to be experimenting. Some will win, some are going to lose. A lot of them are going to just be frustrated. The other thing I think is going to happen is when our market slows down, it's going to, that pain is going to really increase, because sellers who used to sell in a day are now taking a year. You know, I mean, so you got to start thinking that kind of weird thing is going to happen. And so the power dynamics are going to shift. All kinds of weird things are going to happen in the market. You've got to be fluid. You've got to be able to adjust and modify and play along. So all the way back to the practical statement. You got this guy who wants to list his property and offers 0 compensation. My answer, sure, let's try it. Do you understand why I said that? I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it won't work, but I know one thing. If he doesn't work with me, he's going to go try it with somebody else.
Yeah, you got a good point there.
Okay. But I'm going to explain to him at the beginning. I do this with all my listings and these kind of decisions. I would say to him, hey, Charlie, and I made up the name again. Hey, Charlie, let's go for it. Let's try it. But let's just do it for X amount of time. Okay. So you can bring in the element of time. Again, you had to know what his goals were. Like if he had to be somewhere in 3 months, let's say, hey, let's try this for 2 weeks. If it doesn't work, we can adjust. How's that sound? Right?
Oh no, he's not in a rush. He says he's not in a rush to sell. He's
Great. Why does he want to sell?
He just wants to see what offers he gets. And I even brought up the idea of leasing it. And he wanted to lease it like way over, what the comps were. And so when I finally, sent him the comps for the second time, and I was like, see, I'm like, this is another list of comps. It's still, around 2,800. He's like, oh no, I don't want to lease it then. But I think that he just wants to put it on the market to see if he gets any offers, but he's not like in a rush to sell.
What's he going to do with the money if he sells?
That's a good question.
And it's
Yeah,
one
I
you
haven't
have to
asked him
ask.
that.
That's one you got to
Yeah.
ask, right? So that's great. I love that you're bringing this up. You're going to want to ask, the old days, they called it 3 levels deep, right? So that top question was, I want to sell. And the next thing is, well, what are you going to do with the money? Right? You say, well, I want to buy another place. Where do you want to buy another place? What's it going to look like? You're just going to go deep and deep and deep and deep and deep into the questions. Your goal is to understand what their objective is as good as they know it, maybe better, right? Because you may create some clarity in your questions. If you understand what their true objective is, then you can help them. And if you don't, it's actually hard to help them. So you need to know, when I say that, you need to know what their motivation is. Why are they selling? And what their timeline is. When do they want it sold? And then what are they going to do with the money? Are they going to buy another place? Is it an investor and they're going to 1031? Is it a homeowner who wants to sell and buy another place? Or is it someone that already has 3 places and they just want to reduce down to 2? Those are all different things that could happen. If it's just somebody who's playing with the market, I will tell you, I get a little nervous because when I was a little boy, I saw that a house went up for sale in my neighborhood. It was a street over. And, we'd ride our bikes around the block and skateboards and stuff. And I saw this for sale sign go up, and it would be up there forever. And then it would go down, and then another for sale sign would go up, and then it would go down. This happened for almost 20 years. I never knew what was going on. And when I became an adult, I went and asked this guy who is now older, what's going on with your house? Why is there a sign always going up and going down? And it turned out he was in a divorce, and the settlement said he had to put the house on the market, but it didn't say he had to sell it by any certain date. He didn't want to move out. So he just kept putting some crazy price on the house, and it just kept going up for sale and then coming off the market and then going up for sale and coming off the market. So I learned some people don't actually really want to sell.
Mike, also, something that I've used in the past is when I'm trying to help a client make a decision is to think about the options. And, in this case, if they ask me that, maybe I need a little bit of time to say, that's a really great idea, great option. Let me talk to a few people and get back to you. And I want to get you the best information possible. And then going back to them, talk to them. Okay, so, that's definitely one of your options. One of your other options, everybody is still putting, not everybody, but most people are still advertising a commission on MLS. So this could be a disadvantage to you if you have 0% while everyone else is still advertising a commission on MLS. So your first option is just to continue as we normally would and go ahead and offer a compensation ahead of time. You know what it's going to be. Your second option is to put the 0. And then, we can test it and see what happens, see how your showings are. I would expect that we'd get this many showings in the first couple of weeks. And if we don't, then we know that that's, we might have a problem. Another option might be to add something into the broker only remarks that the buyer's agent commission is negotiable. Because at this point we can still add that. Is that right?
I think
It's not
so.
a rule that we can't.
So. Yeah.
And just so that we don't just totally make it seem like we're not going to hardline pay anything. That could be his intention though. And so that's another thing that you would want to ask is, what is your intention? Is your intention to not pay any broker representative a commission? Because if that is your intention, then this could, potentially make it harder to, I don't know. So anyway, that's, that was just kind of my initial thoughts. And then usually, a recommendation after processing all of that, honestly, I personally would recommend that you go ahead and advertise the 3%, the 2.5%, whatever it is, just because the majority of the listings still have that. But I'm on your side. What would you like to do? Totally going to do what you want to do. So after hearing all of that, what would you like to do?
Angela, I love that you're making options for them. I love to do that as well, right? You could do this, 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 or this. Here's what I think is going to happen with each one of your recommendations, and then let them choose. When you were speaking, I thought of another idea. I loved your idea of, hey, no one else is offering 0. I think what you could do is show them rather than tell them, right? You could say that, but then immediately show them the MLS or printout or whatever to show that everybody's offering the X, Y, and Z as a co-op compensation. Just say, hey, here's all your neighbors. That'd be a great one, right? Here's all the properties around you that you're competing with. Let's go through them. This one's offering this one's offering that, this one's offering this one's offering that, this one's offering this. If you were a buyer's agent working with a hot buyer, which one would you go to? And they're going to know, since you might have to explain what you just said, which of these would you go to if you were going to get paid one of them? Would you go to the one that offered X or the one that offered 0? Mr. Seller, Miss Seller, what would you do? And they'll either say it or they'll say it with a snide remark at the end, but they know. Just here. The other one I like to do when you play those games is, hey, what do you do for a living? And they tell you they work in an office. I just make that up. They work in an office. They're a clerk in an office. I just made that up. And you say, okay, well, how much do you, if you went into your office tomorrow and they asked you to do double the work to double the hours, but they wanted to pay you 0, would you go in the next day? Well, what do you mean? Would you work for free? I don't think any of these agents out here want to do that either. What do you think? I don't know. Those are ways you can go about this. Personally, one other thing with Liz Mel, I know she just unmuted yourself, and feel free to talk.
No, I was gonna say that. No, that's all really good advice, because I'm gonna talk to him again tomorrow, because he just said, oh, think about it and then let me know. And I'm like, okay. I was like, I'll let you know. So tomorrow we're supposed to get together again. So I'm definitely gonna give him like a couple of options, but also I think that was a good idea to look at all like the comps in the area and what they paid, for what they paid the buyer's agent, and kind of, show him that and say, hey, look, this is what, what the others did. Like, if you want to sell, it's like, because I don't want him either to just, have it on the market and just, it's just sitting on the market, because then that doesn't look good either. So yeah, I'm definitely, I think that was helpful. I'm going to give him some more options and have everything like written out like on paper so he can see it, on actual paper, and kind of have a better idea of what he's working against.
Print out the MLS listings, the agent side listings, and circle the compensations that are being offered down in all the sheets, so he doesn't think you just made them up, right? That'd be number one. And number two, I would just change a word you said. And by the way, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback. It really doesn't matter what you say, as long as you get the idea across. But you said others, talking about the other sellers. I would say competitors, okay? Your competitors, your competition is offering this, right? A lot of people are competitive and they want to beat out their neighbor, right? So that might be a good word to use. One other thing I'm going to throw out. Well, I'm going to ask a question first. How bad do you want the listing?
How bad do I want the listing, you asked?
Yeah, you. How bad do you want the listing?
Oh, well, I mean, I already know I have the listing because it's actually like a friend of mine. It's a family friend, so I already know that I have the listing.
Sure.
And I actually work with him, so I already know that I have the list. Just you know, because I actually did list it before previously with the two. We had negotiated 2.5, right? So we you know put that as the commission. Buyer side decided to take the listing down. So we took it down, and then that's when he came back at me, oh, well, you know, let's just, you know, wait until August. And then he came back at me with, oh, well, let's list it again, but with 0. So how do you think that's going to look? Because since I took the original one down and then now I'm going to relist it with 0, I mean, I don't know if that's going to look very good either.
I think you have a great opportunity here.
Mhm.
Can I share that with you?
Yes, yeah.
I think that we are going into, as I said, uncharted waters. I am going to throw out an idea at you, which is, why don't you take it and offer 0 and see what happens? Just prove it. Maybe we're all full of it and it'll actually sell. Maybe we're all wrong and it'll still sell, and you'll find out how it gets worked out. Or maybe you'll have 0 showings. We don't know. Why don't you just try it? Now, by the way, your MLS may have an old rule that you had to put at least $1, so you'll have to check your MLS rules.
Okay.
Right? So call up your MLS and just say, hey, what's the minimum I have to put down in the co-op field? And they're going to probably say, well, you know about the lawsuit. I know, but right now, before the lawsuit, what's the minimum I have to put in there? And it'll either be 0 or $1 or something. Because that was the original settlement. The original settlement was there were MLSs that required you to put $1, and then the lawyers who wanted all the money just said, well, we hate that. You need to make it $0, not $1. And that was actually the original settlement. And if that had happened, none of us would be worried about it because it would have just effectively done nothing. But the fact that they're removing the field is the problem. So anyway, double check your MLS rules. I am going to just throw out there, I won't say advise, I'm going to throw out there the idea that you take it at 0 and just see how the market reacts, because you may actually have to take them at 0 moving forward after July 15th. See what the heck happens. You may learn something before the rest of us and get ahead of everything.
Yeah, and I'm definitely probably gonna, since I could still add it in there, you know, in the notes, you know, the agent remarks, I'll add in there that, you know, the fee is what is it called, negotiable. Because I mean, technically it is, you know, and he did say, well, let's just negotiate that fee. So if I can put that on there, at least agents can see that for now, for the meantime.
I understand. Let me just caution that you don't want to do anything against your client's interests. I know you corrected yourself and it's fine. I just want to be careful here. You don't want to have an agreement with your client that you're going to offer 0. And then in the hidden remarks somewhere, you actually tell everybody, but don't worry, that's not true. I'll pay you something, right? So if your client really doesn't want to pay a buyer's agent, and that's what you've agreed to, and that's what you've agreed to, that you want to present to all the agents, to the public, then the public of agents, then that's what you need to put out there, because you have a fiduciary duty to that seller. You have to follow their instructions. And if you can't do that, then you can't work with them, right? And they will ask you to do things you don't want to do. I've had to eliminate sellers for weird reasons I won't go into, but as long as you're okay with whatever they're instructing you to do, you have to do that. I just want to clarify, don't try to hide it in additional provisions, because any agent can print that out and hand it to your seller, and now you're screwed.
Yeah, and I don't think he was planning to hide it, but I do think just explaining that that is one of the options. Sure. And we could also do this. We could put 0 and then put down in the agent only provisions that that any buyer agent commission is negotiable. But I really
Quick
do
question. I have a quick question. Is that something that we would also have to add like in the contract with the seller? You know, if
Yes.
let's say if they said 0, but they'll allow us to put, you know, on the listing, since we're still able to put it, you know, in the public notes that it's negotiable.
Yes, absolutely. You have got the right idea. See, now you're coming at it from the right answer, which is I have to have clarity with my seller about what I'm doing out there in the public, right? Or in this case, to the other agents. You've absolutely nailed it. You want that to be in your listing agreement. Because here, let me tell you one other reason, okay? My father has passed away, but he was an attorney. And when I got in this business, he told me something that really stuck with me. He said, hey, Mike, when you get into all these deals, you're going to be negotiating, people are going to get upset. And at some point you might get sued. And by the way, I've never been sued. I got very lucky. But he said, someday you might get sued. And do you know who is the most likely person to sue you? And I'm thinking, oh, well, the other agent would be mad. Or somebody who's negotiating against us might be mad. I don't know. And he said, your own client. Your own client is the most likely to sue you. And he's probably right. Because sometimes agents don't do what their clients told them to do, right? You don't have clarity. Does that make sense? So I really love how you're going to get clarity with your seller and you're going to put it into your agreement. I think that's exactly where you want to go with this.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
You're going to do great. If you end up doing the 0 experiment, please come back and tell us how it went. I would love to know.
Oh, I will. I've been having so much anxiety about it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
You
But
need to
now
have
I
some
feel a little
fun
better
with it.
going at it tomorrow.
Look at it
Yeah.
this way. You're on the cutting edge. You're going to learn so much more than everybody else, so much faster. If this ends up actually happening. And do like Angela said, give them all the options. And then whatever you pick, if this guy, I don't know the personality, but if he's one of those real hardcore, no, I want to do 0. I want to offer 0. You're like, great, let's write that in. You can even do this. If it's ever gets into those weird gray areas, you can write in the listing agreement exactly like they said, and then you write a letter. You write a letter from you to the seller that says, hey, I'm happy to list this property for you. I'm going to do everything you asked me to do, but I just want to say, I am kind of warning you, and I don't think it's a good idea to offer 0, but I will do that because you asked me. I mean, you really want to feel better about it and kind of do some CYA, but I don't know how that could go wrong if you have it in writing. Although, what am I talking about? That's how this NAR lawsuit happened in the first place. All these sellers signed that I'm going on my high horse. They all signed that they knew there was a commission being paid, but anyway, we shouldn't go there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet. Let me give you a couple more little tidbits that you may not know. And I don't have these confirmed, so I don't even know if I should say them, but I'll just tell you what I've heard. Let's put it that way. I'll just tell you what I've heard and what people are speculating, but it's kind of interesting and you should listen to hear if you can find any more details on this thought. In the NAR settlement, the NAR is going to pay $410 million, I think. 3 or 4 large brokerages have already agreed to pay $50 million plus each. And they've left the door open to go after, I think it's 130 other brokerages, because the NAR settlement didn't protect brokerages with over $2 billion in sales because the attorneys didn't want it to. The plaintiffs' attorneys are suing everybody and getting rich. Let me ask you this. So far, with all the money that they've collected, how much are the attorneys going to make? Anybody have any idea? Nobody knows because they won't disclose their commissions. They won't disclose their fees. Right? That's the irony of this whole thing. But usually in these kind of cases, it's 30 to 40% of the total amount. They are going to come out huge, right? It's estimated somewhere just under 200 million so far that the attorneys are going to get paid. Who knows for sure, but that's the estimate. Now, based on that, based on the numbers that have already been out, based on the fact the attorneys are going to take the biggest chunk, right, and run away to Tahiti or wherever they're going to go when this all settles. This is the most interesting point to me. There are, I believe they said in the lawsuit, there are 40 million sellers they think were affected and should get some of this compensation back. Okay. How much do you think each seller is going to receive from the settlement? Each individual seller, how much are they going to get as their reward for doing this?
I heard it was going to be 20-something dollars a piece if they all showed up to claim it.
Yeah, when you first pose this to someone, they usually, I've asked a couple different people, they're like, oh, and this is real estate agents usually, oh, $5,000, $10,000 at least, right? And the number I've heard so far is $12. $12. Just take what the reward is, minus the lawyers, and divide it by the number of plaintiffs. $12. So we're all getting our nose smashed in for $12 a seller. So, but the attorneys are doing well. All right, folks. Sorry, I ended on a sour note there. I think this is a huge opportunity for you to get out there and get ahead of it, to take action while everybody else is frozen, to not worry about the fact that the game is being changed. Some of the rules in the game are being changed. It's still the same game. All these buyers and sellers still need you. They need your help and they need your services. Excuse me. As Lesmel just pointed out, they need our advice. Angela's pointing out they need our advice. They need to hear from us to find out what to do next, because the media is blowing things out of proportion so they can get viewers. But the fact is, it's more complicated than that, isn't it? And they need our help and assistance to guide them through this process. And I think Andrea had pointed out, repeat and referral, your sphere. These people know, like, and trust you. They want your advice. They want your guidance. Just go out there and offer to help them. All right. So if nobody has anything else, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Angela, what do you think? Is that good?
I think that sounds great. If you guys would like a copy of the replay video, then I think I might have most of your emails, but if you'll go ahead and put your email in the chat, and then I can make sure that you get a copy of that or a link to it. Then I heard someone say today that with any great change, we have new opportunity. And so piggybacking on what you just said, if we stay creative and we, mastermind and come up with processes, the people that don't do that, it's not going to be a good thing for them. But for us, that people that do, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us. So
totally agree. Totally agree. That's awesome. All right. If anybody else wants to put your email in the chat to get the replay, Angela's going to send that out to you. Go ahead and do that. You got to do it before I hang up. I have to hang up. All right. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to end our recording, and I'll give you another couple minutes to put that in. But again, thank you everybody so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I hope this was helpful and useful. Go out there, just again, be positive, be curious, ask a lot of questions, and everything's going to play out, and it's going to play out well. All right, y'all take care. Bye for now. If I can find the off here, hold on.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you. It was so nice having you here.